Don't blend in. Instead, clash with your environment. Stand out. Be uniquely different. That's what will draw attention to your ideas. This is one of the quotes that really grabbed my attention from one of the books of our next guest, our next disruptor, Nancy Duarte. Nancy, welcome to Disrupt Everything podcast series.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Disrupt yourself, then disrupt everyone. Welcome to Disrupt Everything podcast series. It's a place for interviews, stories, and life experiences about ruckus makers, worldwide leaders, disruptors, and high performers. High performers that are disrupting themselves and disrupting everything. A space for dissecting and deconstructing human potential and life mastery, and also modern wisdom. It's also a place for exponential growth, self-mastery, disruptive mindset, technology, entrepreneurship, unstoppable attitude, holistic performance, personal reinvention, life hacking, ultra productivity, self-discipline, peak experiences, you name it. Lifestyle experiments and standing out. It started in 2017 and we are currently on episode 194, 195. And now we have Nancy Duarte, who say that the future isn't just a place you'll go. It's a place you will invent. This is a quote for, again, our today's special guest, Nancy Duarte. Who is Nancy Duarte? Nancy Duarte is a communication expert who has been featured in Fortune, Time magazines, Forbes, Fast Company, Wired, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Cosmopolitan, LA Times, and on CNN, among other media companies and press. Duarte ENC is the global leader behind some of the most influential visual messages and business culture. As a persuasion expert, she cracked the code for effectively incorporating storing patterns into business communications. She has written 6 best-selling books. Those of these books are Resonate, Present Visual Stories that Transform Audiences, The Art and Science of Creating Great Presentations, The HBR Guide to Persuasive Presentations, Illuminate, Ignite Change Through Speeches, Stories, Ceremonialism, and Symbols, Data Story, Explain Data and Inspire Action Through Story, Psydeology, The Art of Science of Presentation Design, The Art and Science of Presentation Design. Nancy, as a storyteller of Silicon Valley and the 5th largest woman-owned employer there, her firm, Duarte, is the global leader behind some of the most influential messages. Nancy has won several awards for communication, entrepreneurship, and her success as a female executive. On the list of 250 women in leadership, Duarte ranks 67, and on World Top 30 Communication Professionals for 2022, Nancy ranks number 2. She has been a speaker on numerous public stages and conferences, and a number of Fortune 500 companies, and also counts many more of around 200 among her film's clientele. Her TED Talk, The Secret Structure of Great Talks, has almost 3 million views. This talk is the one I first discovered Nancy's work back in half a life for me, at least. And it has to say that having Nancy here in the podcast for me is a great privilege, because it was for me one of the most impactful TED Talks I ever seen. And many of my colleagues also agree with that. And this talk started me on the path of leadership. And this talk has been a great inspiration for me and many of the listeners. And this is how I met Nancy virtually. I met her. She didn't met me. So not until now. Nancy Duarte believes that ideas are the most powerful tools that people have. Her passion is to help every person learn to communicate their world-changing idea effectively. Nancy, and this is for me one of the most beautiful parts of the intro. Nancy has 3 grown children who walk in their destiny, a husband who has loved life for life, at least until now, like ever, and also 2 grandkids that take her breath away.
Yeah.
And finish saying another quote that says, words that are carefully framed and spoken are the most powerful means of communication there is. So with this being
That was a
said,
long intro.
that's well-deserved intro, and for
You're
me,
funny.
you've been one of the most female entrepreneurs and professionals, most inspiring female out there in the world. And I've been following your work for a long time, and it's amazing what you have been capable to create with Duarte. Would you will tell us more about it, and the work you do on communication, symbols, presentations, and obviously storytelling. Thank you, Nancy, for being in the podcast and granting us with your time, genius, expert, and mastery.
Well, thank you. I'm excited to be here and answer any questions you have.
So after researching and creating this intro, my first question started like organically, which is, what would you say if someone like me in a podcast like this asks you, what's your story?
What's my story? I feel like people ask me all the time, like, how'd you know? How did you know this is what you wanted to do? And I didn't. Like, I think maybe there was a small seed of it when I was younger, but it's been met with a lot of roadblocks to get here. And I think my story is that it maybe you could frame it as a bit of the American dream in a way, right? I only finished a high school degree, got a C- in speech communication, a D in English, dropped out of college, got married at 18. Not like it's not the starting blocks, of a race that most people start from. And so I think it's taken a lot of moxie, a lot of commitment to a growth mindset, and jumped into the Silicon Valley, and super well read, really smart, really understood, had read the latest and greatest of everything, and just walked into rooms and started to tell people what to say. So now we have a thriving business that landed in a niche. So there's a couple of pivot points in my story. One of them is that in 2000, I tend to make big decisions when there's a downturn for some reason, very counterintuitive moves. And in the dot-com crash, Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, came out, and he said he had a hedgehog concept. And it's, if there's one thing you can be passionate about, you can be best in the world at, and be profitable at, do just that one thing. So in the dot-com era, I shuttered 4 out of 5 of our services and chose to focus just on presentations. That was a real defining moment. And same thing now, right? And we're really focusing during COVID for some reason. We also let go of about 100 customers and focused on just 25 of the best. And as you would guess, those relationships deepened and grew. So I think I would say my story is that I'm an intuitive leader who is growing every day in empathy and trying to make a big difference in the world and honor each other's differences and really understand each other so we can make the world a better place. That was kind of like not really a narrative of my life story, but I think based on what you're trying to do with your show is what I chose to share. But
And Nancy, this takes me to another question, which is, if as a person, as a professional, so we are the same one, you were about to put your life in a timeline and select or choose the most impactful or powerful milestones, what would they be?
You know, it's funny. I have an exercise. We have an exercise like that in our story course.
Oh, wow.
It's a tool to be able to recall stories, and it's based heavily on Kurt Vonnegut's uh, preposition that if you could feed every story into a database, this was like just as computers were coming out. The XY axis was at the top would be good fortune, the bottom ill fortune over time. So I've actually mapped out my whole life like, oh, it was good fortune, ill fortune, good fortune, ill fortune. It's kind of cathartic and can be emotional because sometimes you're like,
Wow.
oh, I remembered this very dark bad fortune, or I forgot about this very high good fortune. And I remember I was doing it up to the year 10 years old. And the earliest I can see where I could start to see a pattern of who I would become up until about 5, there was ill fortune, ill fortune, ill fortune, everything from feeding my sister baby aspirin to, abuse, neglect, all those kinds of things. And then in about the fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, it was like spikes, good fortune, good fortune, good fortune, good fortune. And I was like, what? What is that? And so when I looked at that, there was a little pattern of moments where I got to work at my own pace and could compete against myself. So they had like the reading program. I could go from yellow to green to blue to purple to red and be done, right? Or the math, like I just was sent home with a packet. And if I did the packet, I got the next packet. And I was done with all my elementary school math before the 5th grade, right? So and then like selling mints. It's like Girl Scouts, but it was called Campfire Girls. I got to do that. It was like, oh my gosh, my whole team, we won and sold the most or whatever. So I saw these things where I was happy. I was happy. And I thought, that's so interesting, and then I've got other peaks and valleys. But the earliest thing that I think showed me a little bit about my identity or who I would become was in this little grouping of there was actually 4 of them where I feel like I was doing what I was kind of called to do. But it's kind of hard to do your timeline like that in that format. And so we keep wondering, what do we do with this storytelling course? Because the exercises to recall stories, sometimes people need counseling. No, we haven't had that happen yet. So we what we've done is we've limited it just to work stories. We don't, in the workshops, we don't let them go personal because it can get, if you're really honest with yourself, life is hard and it's messy and you have to face that at some point in your life or you won't show up as your true self. And so that's why we have exercises that do that. But yeah, I think that, I feel very fortunate that I get to do what I think I was put on this earth to do. And I don't think a lot of people get to say that. And presentations kind of found me. It wasn't like I grabbed onto them. They kind of discovered me, and I've just been a vehicle to transform presentations. We really have transformed that whole medium, and I'm really proud of that.
How was this? I hope I'm guessing it was a love at first sight, but how did it find you? How was that moment, that Eureka moment when you found?
Yeah, like it's funny because Apple, we popped down to the Silicon Valley actually for my husband to go to school. And he answered a little tiny 2-line ad in the local newspaper back when we had newspapers, not knowing that he was applying with this gal who had an agency that supported Apple. And then the gal's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do aromatherapy. So she's like, here's my clients. I made cold calls. We won big contracts with Apple right away. So Apple was our first client. We've had them every year. They're one of our biggest, they're either first, second, or third largest client for 33 years. And people don't realize, but Apple was the first company to put together a conference where they hooked up a computer to a projector, to a digital projector. Before then, we had 35 millimeter slides and you put them in a carousel. It was very different. But projectors cost anywhere from 15 to 30,000, so they weren't prevalent. But what happened within a few years is the price of projectors came down to where people started to have them on every conference table. But the other interesting thing that happened is Apple had a really big layoff in 1993. This whole division we worked with scattered across the Silicon Valley, and that was one of the best things that happened to me. So we were known within Apple as the go-to presentation company. And then when they popped up and scattered around the valley, it planted beautiful seeds for us. So all of a sudden, all the major brands were calling and asking for presentations. My designers, they all wanted, they're like, can we do print? Can we do web? Can we do this? Can we do that? And I'm like, okay. Cause they're like, we don't want to do presentations. It was the scum of the earth back then. Like, people don't realize just how bad they were back then. And that's why Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, was so important, because we kept being in denial that we were a presentation company. We kept saying, oh, well, we're better than presentations. We didn't want to focus on it. We wanted to diversify, be an integrated firm or whatever. And so when I read that book, when you read these books, there's these moments where it's like a clarion call, where your heart races and you're just like, hits you like bricks, and you're like, this is true for us. We're going to move on it. So that's what I did. I canceled all of these other services and was like, you know what? We can be best at this, and I'm passionate about it. So for the employees that weren't, we had to have that conversation because we were going to go big on presentations. So I think I've always been really comfortable as a public speaker, like how we were talking earlier. You're like, well, I'm just going to riff and it's going to be a conversation. I like that. I prefer that actually over having it all be planned and controlled. So I'm comfortable like riffing and speaking. But I didn't dream we would build anything that's become what this is. And we're growing, and we have goals to grow and double and really reach more and more and more people. We really want to transform 1 million people into great communicators. And that means we have to scale to be able to do it. And that's what we're doing. We're biting the bullet. We're going in. So
I read a quote where you were saying that so don't get stuck some like this. Don't get stuck into PowerPoint, so because you won't flow us, right?
Right.
Nancy, what have you learned from creating presentations for more than 3 decades?
Yeah.
Because if I recall, what is 1988, right?
1988. Yeah. Wow, you did your homework. Good job. Oh, man. I mean, the lessons I've learned, I think the biggest, in order of importance to what's shaped me as a human, I think first is empathy. I hint at it in the TED Talk where I say, the audience is the hero. You're not the central figure. The audience is the hero and you're the mentor. And I think that's what empathy does. So if you think about mentors like Yoda, even like he was like 800 years old. He'd been a Jedi Knight for 800 years, very experienced, right? And he came alongside someone else and helped them get unstuck. I think that's what empathy does is you realize, it's not about me. It's about this other person, helping them get unstuck. And part of it is rooted in how I was brought up. I was raised in a very low empathy and kind of neglect. It was in a state of neglect. And so my body of work is kind of clawing at this thing that I never had as a kid, trying to recreate and serve up models for others so they can also see things through an empathetic lens. For me, that's been the most important thing. And I'm still working on showing up as an empathetic leader. Nobody's perfect, right? But I think that's been the biggest thing that I've learned. And that's why empathy, in our Duarte method Venn diagram, empathy is where all the circles overlap. Like it's the core. Don't communicate unless you have empathetically thought about who you're communicating to. Take a short walk in their shoes and communicate in a way they need to hear it, not in the way you want to say it. That to me has changed me, it's changed our material, it's changed our company, and it changes most lives, is to have an empathy-centered methodology, for sure.
And what steps you follow to be persuasive while you staying empathetic?
Yeah. It's funny. Some people don't like the word persuasive, and I like it.
I love it.
I love the word. They're like, oh, don't say persuasive. It's offensive. You should say influence. I'm like, no, I don't know. I'm glad you said it that way. influence is interesting. Persuasiveness is interesting. When I saw that model, that's in my TED Talk, this you can call it a persuasive model. It's a story model, but it harnesses the rise and fall of tension that makes a great story. So you apply these methods to your presentations or to the spoken word, whatever. And what was interesting was when I first saw it and knew it, I almost didn't publish it. I almost changed that book and turned it into something different because I was a bit concerned about, would people use this only to persuade for good, or would they use it for evil also? And because when I saw it like I fell on my knees and cried and was scared. I was kind of shaking. It sounds really dramatic, but I was nervous about the impact it could have on good and evil. And then I decided, you know what? Most people are trying to push the world forward, create human flourishing, create a better place. Whether I think your perspective of a better place is the same as my perspective of a better place, that's up for debate. But I think in general, most people are good. And so then I decided to publish it. And it really is a method that appeals to the imagination. We have emotional appeal, we have analytical appeal, and this body of work helps you appeal to the imagination so you can have hope, and people will be persuaded to create this alternate future that you're wanting them to do, that your vision and your talk or whatever is posing that they do. So I think I get so many letters. I mean, it's humbling. We get so many letters, so many notes, pinged on LinkedIn, pinged on I'll never be the same. Your work changed my life. And it's just humbling. And it's because people learned how to show up differently. And it's just cool. I mean, it's just so cool to, contribute to the benefit of others. And it's humbling. It's humbling.
What do you think? What do you think if it has happened? What do you think has evolved in the pattern of the speeches of the greatest communicators?
What has evolved in it?
Yes, what has evolved? If something has evolved.
That's a good question. So I've gone back in my analysis. So I found this shape, and then I started to analyze lots of speeches. And I went back to the 1800s. I went all the way back as far as we can. St. Francis of Assisi. I did Sermon on the Mount, which was Jesus, which is the year 0. So they all have this same pattern. I think recently, with everyone going remote, the only thing that's different now in this remote environment is that the cadence in which you need to use contrast, like what is, what could be, is tighter. People are going to lose interest if you don't keep the tasty little bits coming at them. So in a remote environment, you're competing with people's inbox. So if what's coming out of your mouth isn't more interesting than getting through their email so they could leave on time, they're going to go through their email while they're listening to you. So it's almost like audio trumps visuals now. They'll minimize your face, they'll minimize your slides, and they're just ripping through their email. And so you have to be using vocal variety, like how your voice, sometimes I'll be like, oh my God, this slide's amazing. I'll just say something like that just so maybe they'll be tempted to get out of email and look at what I'm doing. But you have to use vocal variety. Sometimes it helps to have two people's voices because the brain re-engages when novelty is introduced. And then the way you structure your content has to be tighter, shorter bursts of interest. Otherwise, they're just gonna zone out, and you don't want that. You want them to listen. And then the moments that have to stand out, like as an organization, we have our big vision launch actually this Thursday, day after tomorrow, and it's big. We put a lot of energy into it. We make a lot of excitement around it. It's one of those moments that needs to stand out above all others. And then we do another miniature version of it every month. Every quarter, and then we have a monthly meeting. We make those so empathetic, so valuable, so good, that everyone looks forward to it. You should see all the hype. Everyone's like, what's the vision? What's the vision? Like, what's going on? Oh my God. It's just it's so fun. But if you have some that are so important, they need to stand out above the rest. And then there's like, let me update you on this project we're doing. A little project update is very different than let's launch the vision to the moon. That's so different. And so you need to be really careful as a leader. We need to make sure we know, oh, this moment needs to breach the surface and stand out above it. And it needs to be more effervescent, more meaningful. And I need to put more work into it. The whole exec team puts, I don't even know, probably 20, 30 hours into our talk that's coming up this Thursday. Because when we do this well, it creates momentum that lasts the whole year. So, and creating an effervescent moment virtually isn't easy. So we have all these breakouts, we have all these activities, we have people teaching bulleted journaling. We have someone talking about World War II. I mean, super interesting where we're gathering as little cross-functional teams and we get to learn about each other. And then we have the core courses. We have an astronaut coming to speak. I mean, it is 2 half days of beauty and winsomeness, and nobody's going to be bored because they all chose to be there. So I think a lot's changed just, from everyone being remote. Yeah, I guess that's my answer.
I bought it. I go to your event.
It's beautiful. I know we don't tape it or anything. It's kind of it's very internal, very personal, very it's really neat.
What's the best piece of advice on communication that you remind to yourself over and over?
Oh, I think I have to remind myself over and over to show up differently. I even just wrote a sticky note, right? As a leader and somebody who has a kind of a big personality, very animated, right? I feel like sometimes I come across as commanding instead of collaborative, or commanding instead of curious. So I actually literally, I don't know if you could see this, but I made a sticky note and it's to myself. So you asked, what do I have to tell myself as a communicator? I have a bias to action. So my note to myself that I'm living off of right now is that I need to move from controlling action to curious yielding. So that's what I'm trying to do. I look at this every time I show up in a meeting and I'm like, am I making declarations and being controlling, or am I being curious, right? So that's what I'm trying to do, move from controlled action to curious yielding. And it's just where I'm at in this stage of my career as a communicator. Yeah, internally, that's what I know.
Wow.
I'm so honest, huh? So that's what my development.
Thank you for.
I'm trying to develop that way.
Thank you for sharing with us. How to harness the power of a great storytelling, or what would you say to those out there that repeat themselves that they are not good at telling stories?
What's funny about the timing of your question is I found this guy and he's really amazing comedian, really great guy. And I had sent a script by them and he'll change this, make this funny, like that. And so I thought, well, I'm pretty good. I'm okay at storytelling. We're really good at business story, right? And so I'm writing this new body of work where I have a series of personal stories, and contacted me just yesterday. It's like, well, who wrote this? Because it's really bad. And I'm like, me. I said, but I thought I didn't put tons of energy into it because I thought you guys would take it and shape it. And he's like, we really don't want to work with you anymore because we are really good storytellers and we don't want to help build your platform. Like, it was really interesting. So I'm saying that to say nobody can get mastery of this unless you are like a stand-up comedian every night, right? And so I don't want to scare people because some people would perceive I'm actually a pretty good storyteller. But I said that to say that even I can improve. And so sometimes just sharing a scene or a moment, you don't have to stand up and talk about every terrible thing that happened to you. Sometimes it's just exposing a little tiny peek into your humanness. So we worked with a public CEO who had been at a previous very public company. And when he came to this new company, he was like, oh, at my other company, just like patting his own back. He's like, my other company, I was awesome. At my other company, I did this. At my other company, I did all this great stuff. And people at the new company were like, we don't want to hear that. anymore. Like, so HR reached out and was like, we really need you to fuel his script with some humanness and storytelling. All we did is say, hey, let's think of a story where you kind of blew it at the new company, where you kind of messed up, because people want to know that life is hard and their job is hard. So we encouraged him, found a story, and it was like, hi, when I first started at this new company, I made a real big bet on this product I thought was going to be a win, and it wasn't. That's all he did. Got a standing ovation. Like, the rest of it was just the same. And it was just like, they were like, we've never had this kind of response to anything he's ever done. And all he did was that. Like, it isn't like, oh, structure it. It's this big complex thing. It is giving, at the basic part, it's giving people a little window into your soul and say, look, I'm vulnerable. Life's hard too. And I overcame it. And here's this victory. I nailed it. You can nail it too. It's not that complicated. But it's also a discipline that even I have more work to do on to be really good at it. So it's like, I think it'll be a lifelong quest for me. And I'm committed. I'm committed to that.
And so when you create the story on, so some of the important elements are empathy and persuasion, right? And what are the elements that you need to create this kind of a story, which is compelling, persuasive, and empathetic?
I think it has to be audience first. And I think that's what the storytellers yesterday were like. There's a little bit in here like, oh, Duarte had the best year in 2021. They're like, most of your audience didn't. So don't even say that. Like, it was interesting because I had run it by an internal Duarte audience, and I'm like, great, we love it. Now, maybe because I'm their boss or their boss's boss's boss, but they're like, this is great, practically perfect. And these other kind of stand-up comic kind of like people, they were like, cut this is offensive to me, don't do this. Like, and it was so valuable to me. That's why I'm so bummed, where they're like, yeah. But yeah, so I think empathy is massively important. And one of the ways to do it is do exactly what I did, is make sure that you run things by other people. So like I was telling you, we're getting ready for this on Thursday morning, our vision kickoff. Well, what we'll do is, if we think something, we're like, will this affect an employee? We'll ping an employee and say, hey, we're planning to say this. Does this feel comfortable, or does this need more framing? And then we chime in on each other, and we're like, hey, from my lens, when you word it this way, don't word it that way, word it this way. Sounds like a lot of work, but I'm telling you, one year we didn't get traction in the vision. And believe it or not, it was because I had used the word support so many times the previous year that people were glazed. Just the word support. They were like, if you'd even just used the word help, you would have gotten more traction. I'm like, are you kidding me? Just even the nuance of language choices floored me. And so it sounds kind of somewhat bizarre, but one of the things you try to do as a leader to bring traction is remove as much friction as possible, or address the friction boldly and be like, look, there's all this friction. And so, because you're wanting to get as much traction as possible, which means to change the minds of any detractors. And sometimes the best way to do that is by inserting a story or structuring your talk in the shape of a story, using attributes from story to do that.
Nancy, you published a book called Slideology, which has been translated into 8 languages, by the way, where you teach readers how to think visually.
Yeah.
So what are because I'm really interested on what are the most important learnings that you have gotten from this book, because sometimes we miss this point from the author.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like, I wrote that book in 2008. It was my first book, and never knew I was an author. And what was interesting about that book is my own team was so busy, I didn't have help. Now, I didn't design the book itself, but I wrote the whole thing, sourced all the visuals, did all that. It's old. I mean, there's still flip phones in there, so it needs a nice overhaul. But it was definitely because we had committed to presentations. We had worked for years in them. I knew the business case for design. I knew the business case. And that's one of my favorite reviewers said it's the first time someone's codified the actual business case for why design is important in business. And the things I learned building that book were things I had to learn myself. Like I started this whole talk saying, I didn't get a degree. Granted, Cisco paid for me to get a degree from UCLA, which was really cool. As one of their diverse suppliers, they did that for me. So my husband and I, at the time, there was no internet. We went to the library and we checked out books and we studied what is design, what are the most important, what's typography? Like, think about it. Typography was a skilled labor kind of thing that you had to be trained to do. It was a journeyman. So we got all the design annuals, the design books, and decided, what do we need to know? Next thing we know, Adobe called and they're like, do you know what a ligature is? Do you know what an M-dash is? And we're like, yeah, we know what that is. Like, we had just read it in the library. It was just crazy town. So I think that being a lifelong learner, I think that I felt like everything I learned as a design attribute, I could take it and turn it and make it clear to the everyday communicator why that was important. And that book still sells really well. 2008, and it still sells up there with all my other books with a flip phone in it. So my team is excited. Actually, I've kind of pointed to the couple people that are going to make the new reinvention of what it means to communicate visually today.
Looking forward to read it.
No.
How do you stay human in so human as you stay in a hectic and a hyper-connected world as the world we live in?
Yeah, I think by my nature, I maybe let it all hang out, sometimes a little too far. But I spend time hiking every morning. I have so here's my workspace, and just opposite my workspace is my contemplation space. It's completely different space. I will sometimes I start on a walk with reflective teachings or reflective music, and then I sit. I sit with a different kind of lamp, a different kind of light bulb. I light the space a little differently, and I sit quiet. I also try to take like a full day off where I replenish myself through reading, through spending time with my husband. Like every Sunday morning, we will listen to a teaching and talk about it. And like the whole day, Sunday, I set the whole day aside. The whole day escaped me. I was just so caught up in beauty, in like we didn't even have visitors. So I'm working on more discipline around that, and it's regrounding me. So that's been really fun. I hike too. I refresh on a mountain. My husband refreshes at the ocean, right? So I hike, and my mind is so active that I hike until my mind quiets. Sometimes it's 2 hours, sometimes then my mind quiets, and then I have this open space to just...
It's like a meditative practice, right?
Yeah, it is for me. Hiking is and then I'm open. I remember one time just in the foothills here, it was kind of foggy and there was this swirling fog. I was at that place where my mind was open, and there's not that many people up there when you are up that high. I just danced. I just like raised my hands and tried to mimic the shape of this swirling fog, and just was like, I didn't even care if people saw me, because it's freeing, right? To not feel like you have the cares of the world on your shoulders and stuff.
Changing to Duarte, what's the biggest takeaway you take from going from zero to hero with your firm, Duarte? Because it's been skyrocketing.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's skyrocketed, and then it went crazy when my TED Talk came out, like crazy straight up, and then it's flattened for a while. It's almost like we've been in the valley of pause, and now we set a goal just pre-COVID to like double, and people were like, oh, but it's COVID. We get like a year. We get a bonus year to do it. I'm like, you know what? Let's try to do it. Let's do a moonshot goal. And so I think for me, in really trying to change as a leader, I start to see how some of my behavior has made it so that we're going to stay an entrepreneurial firm if I don't do what's on my sticky note, right? Where I go from controlled action to this curious yielding. And so what we're trying to do is move from this controlled entrepreneurship to this professionally managed firm that scales. And so for me right now, that's at least the season I'm in. I'm trying to let go, because I love the entrepreneur phrase. I get to have everybody all up in my business. I got to be all up in theirs, and that's not how it's going to work at scale. I enjoy the scrappy entrepreneur phase. And I started to realize I need to let go of that and have that be gone for me so that we can become and change as many lives as we're setting out to change. So that's where I'm at right now. That's been my most recent big aha, is that I have been like one of the inhibitors to our own growth. Because of my scrappy entrepreneurial self isn't what you need at scale.
I'm really, really curious to know about what you said. How do you cope with an effective communication?
Yeah. People ask me all the time, like, if I'm sitting in the audience of a really bad presenter, they're like, oh my God, what did you think? I'm like, you know what? I have to turn that off, because I can't be analyzing, can't be judging, can't be doing all that, or I won't hear the message they're trying to say. I got a lot of people asking me about how different presidents show up. And it was funny. One time I was actually in Taiwan and there was an election going on, and I don't speak the language, but they were like, well, there's this one candidate. And they're like, we want you to comment then just on her body language. And she's pointing and screaming. And I'm like, oh, this is a trap. They're probably trying to get me to say demeaning things about this candidate, and I don't even know about her political stance, And so I was like, I'm not comfortable. I looked great because they put these really pretty fake eyelashes on me, but I still didn't say anything about the candidate. So I think I have to turn that off. And we do analyze presenters, but like what we'll do is, if there's an executive at a company and their team of executives, we will analyze and we can give them a score so that we can make a development plan for them to be stronger communicators. But we just have to suspend our comparing whether someone's doing it right or wrong. There's just not enough time in the day to spend our time doing that.
How do you deal with distractions? Now that you spoke about working remotely and in the world we live today, distractions.
Yeah, that's a good question.
They used to say ego is the enemy, but I said distraction is the enemy.
I think everyone should maybe tune into when their most creative brain work is done. The nature of work today is like, oh, you get a message, you get an email, you get a phone call, you get a Zoom, you get a this, and carve out your most productive thinking time. When my kids were little, I thought that was late in the night. Now, as an entrepreneur, not proud of this, but I used to get one REM cycle of sleep, which is only 4 hours, when my kids were small and the business was growing. So my most creative, I thought, or it probably was really just the only time my household was quiet, but it was between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. That's when I got my big, meaty proposals done. It's when I did my storyboarding. I did my best work then, probably because I could focus. Well, when my kids left home and I became an empty nester, I found that it's really the morning time. So I block my calendar until 10 a.m. every day. I wake up around 5:30, 6, and I get my work done. I get my real work done. It might be writing an article, but a lot of times it's reviewing something someone wants to release internally, or meeting with a partner or something like that. And so I do that kind of work. The meetings and stuff are all after I do my actual work. And then everything else in my day can be interrupt driven, and it doesn't matter because I got my real work done in the morning. I'm telling you, I am distracted. I'm a hummingbird. So in the morning, it's not it's non-linear for me still. I'll have 3 projects that I'm working on. I'll work on this, and then when I get stuck, I'm like, and then I work on the next one, and then I'll be like, oh, I've lost interest in this. I work on the next one. So sometimes I'll be working on multiple threaded things until, and then obviously if one is due, then I just have to crank and get through it. But everyone has their own way of working, and mine's not the only way. It's just one way. But I do think people need to know when they get their actual work done. And you could put an away message or tell your team, tell your direct reports, say, hey, stay off of chat or whatever from this time to this time. And it works for me.
Nancy, we're getting to the last part, 2 questions until we get to the last part, which are rapid fire questions.
Okay.
If you were to name a lesson that you will never want to forget, what will it be?
I think it's that to honor each other's differences. My husband and I told you earlier, I'm married a romantic Hispanic. We're on our 40th year of marriage, and we're very,
Congratulations.
very different. Yeah, we are like, we complete each other. We're very different, 180 degrees different. And I think taking those findings and learnings and applying them to life, applying them to the business, I just really never want to forget that, because when people are different from you, sometimes, like I do this to him more than he does it to me, I hurt him. My intent isn't to hurt him. My intent, was either to build him up or to get him to do the dishes or something, right? But so I think it's this: honor each other's differences and have a vibrant forgiveness. So we're different, and we vibrantly are forgiving. Would be the one thing I never want to lose.
And can you share with us what's your recipe for creating the life and career that you have created so far? Your
the recipe?
The recipe. Yeah. I told you with the rusty English. Huh? The recipe.
Yeah. That's a big question. I wish it was a recipe. I would say the one thing we did for ourselves, and we've taught our children, is to wake up every day and ask yourself, what brings me passion and what brings me peace? If it doesn't bring you passion and peace, don't do it. So my kids aren't interested in the business. My daughter is a high school science teacher, and my son is an electrical. He's starting his own business, which is awesome. So they both found their purpose, their passion, their peace. I didn't force them to do what I wanted them to do. So that's what my husband and I do. It's like, how do we want to spend today that's going to fulfill our calling or your passion or purpose? And what do we want to do that brings us peace? And sometimes bringing yourself peace means saying no to big opportunities, or saying yes to things that scare you, but it's the right thing to do. So it's not like do the things that make you feel peaceful because it's a cop-out. It's do the things that challenge you, but still feel right, still feel like the right thing to do. And I'm really proud of how my kids are all adults now, but really proud of them. And I think that's been a guiding principle for my life.
Thank you for sharing this, something so valuable. Now we head into the rapid fire questions.
Oh, okay.
So hope you find that fun and interesting. And I think I enjoyed so much writing them. What kitchen tool do you identify with?
What tools do I identify with?
What kitchen tool you identify with?
Probably a whisk. Do you know what those are?
Yes.
The beaters. or the food chopper, probably my food processor, because you put anything in it, you just go and it's done. So it's quick, it's efficient, and it just plows through stuff.
What are the books, or what is the book that has impacted you the most?
Well, other than the scriptures, I just finished a book that's probably done a deeper transformation than other, and it's a book on forgiveness, because I was really attacked this year by somebody, and it was unfounded, and I had to find peace through releasing that, and so that's been really good. So I think that one probably, maybe I'm like my 3rd, 4th time through it in 2 months, so it's been really good.
Is there any podcast out there that is a must for you?
I like Masters of Scale. That's with Reid Hoffman. I have a lot. I can't get to all of them because I have some business ones, some spiritual ones. I try to have my walking time be my more contemplative time. But I would say on the business side, it's Masters of Scale.
One subject you would like to learn more about?
That's a good question. I just am so curious about so much. I like to learn about things that I'm going to be writing about. So I have obviously leadership stories that I'll be writing about. Sales enablement is coming up. What is a sales story? So I enjoy going deep into research, going deep into the decks and the work that we've done for our customers and finding patterns. I love doing that. And now that I'm delegating more, letting go more, I'm going to have more time this year to do it. So I tend to topically go through what I think my readers want or what the market need is, like where are the big gaps in communication, and I dive in to where the big gaps are. And so that's what I love to do, is doing research or doing reading on behalf of helping others be set free.
The most random thing you like to do?
Most random thing I like to do is I jump on the couches with my grandkids and we blow up a air mattress and we throw it around the room and we jump and we fly. And yeah, we capture it in video all in slow motion because it's hysterical to laugh at grandma and how she jumps. So yeah.
What movie do you enjoy quoting the most?
It is so random. My family, for some reason, my kids, my husband, all liked this obscure movie called So I Married an Axe Murderer. And they also like Princess Bride, old movies, and probably Christmas Vacation. Somehow a line from those three movies makes it into every day at our house. So I don't know why, but they're not like, award-winning flicks. One movie have watched every year is Amadeus. So my son is a classical composer, and we've watched that like almost every Thanksgiving since that one came out.
What is one thing you regret spending money on?
That I regret spending money on? There was this one time my husband walked me into a jewelry store and he's like, I'll buy you anything you want. And I started to cry. I was like, oh, baby, wow, $12,000 ring, this, that. So I found this ring that I would have just loved to have had. I found it. And I said, okay, let's look at it. I think it was $12,500. I said, with this money, we can buy my mom and dad a car and we can pay off your grandma's bill because she'd had colon cancer. So let's not buy this. And I found $125 cubic zirconium equivalent. So it looked just like it, but it was a fake diamond made out of cubic zirconium. Nobody ever asked me if it was real. They just assumed it was real, right? And I felt really great about that. And then within a week, I am not lying, I put it on the little to do the dishes, took it off like you're supposed to. My other rings were so cheap, I just wore them when I did. Gone. The thing's gone. I don't know what, it got knocked in the trash. It got knocked down don't know. So it's almost like it's not really a regret. I didn't regret buying it. I regretted losing it because it cost me $125,000, but it symbolized generosity to others. So that was
how beautiful.
Bummer. Yeah.
What can you name or can you tell us the skill that has saved your life?
Probably forgiveness. Yeah, probably forgiveness.
The most needed habit for everyone listening this podcast?
Empathy.
What trait most defines who you are?
Yeah, I know you said these were rapid. I don't know about my rapid answer to that. I would say I don't know. I think I would say generosity, maybe. Yeah.
It fits perfectly into who you are. Finish the phrase, the way to my heart is.
Quality time.
What's the kindest thing someone ever did for you?
That's that my husband not only married me, but stuck it out for 40 years, for sure. He's a good man. He loves me. Like, he still loves me. And every day he tells me, it makes me feel loved and makes me feel beautiful. It's the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me. Yeah.
What never fails to make you laugh?
My husband. Every day he also makes me laugh without fail. Yeah.
If you were to devote the rest of your life to philanthropy, what cause would you choose?
Actually, it's funny. I'm trying to figure that out now so I could build a life that would be able to do that. So
Amazing.
I've taken a first pass at that. And it has to do with the stakeholders. Like my husband, like I said, he's Mexican, I'm female, and we pulled ourselves up. And so we really want to figure out how we can spend our life teaching people to be good communicators and help them pull themselves up, whether that's in society, in their career, out of poverty. Like, we just really feel like what we're sitting on is a powerful way to transform lives. And so we're trying, and by maybe narrowing who we focus on, we'll have more impact than like, oh, the whole world. And so that's what we're trying to figure out. So right now we do give a lot to, solving unclean dirty water, solving the sex slave trade, anyone is imprisoned, those kinds of things. But we're actually working on that right now to try to figure out, because just like how I focused only on presentations, I really want to focus where and how we give back and write a real vision and beautiful purpose and mission around that.
What means for you every time you hear the word Duarte?
Legacy. That's what I hear. That's what I say.
Can you give us a question to ponder?
That's a good one. I would say, what do you need? Like, I guess a question to ponder is how you manage your time shows what's a priority in your life. So I want to have you ponder the opportunity to objectively look at your calendar and see if your values are actually what you espouse them to be.
And last but not least, Nancy, you were about to send a message. Well, in fact, you are sending a message to everyone listening to this podcast. What would you be your final message before ending this interview?
I think maybe there's been themes around empathy, around passion, around honoring differences. And I want to just challenge everybody to show up as your true and authentic self. And that means we're not perfect, and that we need to embrace each other in all of our imperfections and still rally and still make the world a better place.
Nancy, where people can find you in the internet?
Oh, awesome. Duarte.com. There's a bunch of free stuff at duarte.com/Nancy that I put together for people who listen to podcasts. I'm on Twitter at Nancy Duarte, and then I do connect to anyone who connects to me on LinkedIn.
We make sure we include this in the show notes, as well as the courses, the books, and so many resources you mentioned in the podcast. Nancy, thank you so much. The final quote I had, you said during the podcast that somehow is you are not the hero who will save the audience. The audience is your hero, and you definitely are this little and modern Yoda mentoring us.
And, that's awesome.
we are so blessed and so grateful and so fortunate to have you in this podcast. I hope you had a wonderful time, and thank you
It
for
was
being in
fun.
the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for the great questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. To the rest, this being Nancy Duarte. Check out Nancy's books, and if you have if your company or business or opportunities resonates, contact with Duarte. We will put this in the show notes. Leave a review in your favorite platform, especially if you use Apple Podcasts or Spotify that now admits ratings. Leave a comment on the page. If you're listening from our podcast website, you can download your next episode in English in 2 weeks. The previous episode in English was with William B. Irvine about the Stoic Way. And as you know, Disrupt Everything is one of the few podcast series that is recorded, that records episodes in English and in Spanish, alternatively. And if you are only English listener, we have over 80 episodes with Seth Godin, Mark Manson, Frank Blake, Dennis McKenna, you name it. You can skip the ones in Spanish also, but if you are fluent with Spanish, you can check the episodes too. So disrupt yourself or die trying.